Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum class. I welcome you to English grade 6 video lessons. This is your instructor Zia Hamid, hoping that you're doing well and enjoying your learning. Now, we are dealing with our unit number 3. You have gone through it quite well. The title is Captain Muhammad Sarwar Shaheed. This is our unit number 3 and the competency is of grammar. The topic is pronouns with lecture number 1A. Let's begin by reading our students' learning outcome for this lesson. Now, our SLO is recognize and use personal pronouns as subjective, objective, possessive cases, and demonstrative, interrogative, reciprocal, and reflexive pronouns like this, that, one another, myself. My dear learners, in this lecture number 1A, we will be only dealing with personal pronouns as subjective, objective, and in the possessive cases. And the rest of the SLO will be covered in the next lecture 1B. So, we are supposed to look at personal pronouns and in scenarios like when it's subjective, objective, or in the possessive cases. Now, since we have broken down it quite well and we will be looking at all these things, first here is a vertical linkage of this SLO with the previous grade that you have already gone through, and you can take a moment to recall what's written over here and then come back with a fresh mind to do this amazing brainstorming session with me. Now, in our brainstorming session we have a very interesting prompt that how can you avoid repetition, repeating the same thing over and again, of nouns in speech and writing. So, to avoid repetition, what's your strategy, what's your way of avoiding repetition when we are using of nouns in speech and in also our writing? Now, you can come up with different answers. Let's talk about personal pronouns from your book, page 20. Now, let's begin by recalling the pronouns definition. Pronouns are words we use instead of a noun. We have both subject and object pronouns called personal pronouns. So, in personal pronouns, which is a kind of a pronoun, we have the subject and object pronouns. And we know that pronoun is a word that we use instead of the noun, and we use it to avoid repetition in our speech and in our writing. Now, let's see in both the cases of subject and object. So, with subject, we have personal pronouns that we use like I, she, he, you, it, they, we, and in objects, when we are dealing with objects and we want to use personal pronouns to avoid repetition, to keep avoiding the object again and again, we use personal pronouns like me, her, him, you, it, them, and us. So in both the cases, the purpose is to avoid repetition, whether it's a subject or an object. Let's move on. Let's talk about first subjective pronouns. So subjective pronouns are used as the subject of a sentence. Let's look at an example. First, we have all these subject pronouns, subjective pronouns as we call them, and now let's look at them in different sentences. So in the sentence, I like flowers, now I is a subjective pronoun. It is replaced after a name. The name could be Ahmad, Maryam, or anything, or John. So we used, instead of that, we used our name, I. For example, in this one, I like flowers. Instead of saying your name again and again, you have to use the subjective pronoun I. Now, she is my friend. Now instead of naming her again and again in your speech and writing, you use the subjective pronoun. To show when there are more than one person, you use the pronoun they, and this is also a subjective pronoun because it's used instead of the subject. Instead of naming all of them that we are talking about, we use the subjective pronoun they and we avoid the repetition. So we saw it in all different scenarios with first person, second and third person. Now, objective pronouns. Now they are used as the object of a sentence. Let's look at some examples. Here are some objective pronouns like me, you, him, her, it, us and them. Now let's take a look at them in different sentences. So in the sentence, the teacher called me. Now the teacher is the subject and the action is done on the object, which is me. So instead of saying your name again and again, you can just use this objective pronoun and avoid repetition. Now in the sentence, we saw her at the park. We used her, the objective pronoun, instead of naming it, since it is an object. The dog followed them. Now them here is also an object, but instead of using noun, we used pronoun. And what kind of pronouns, my dear learners, did we use? We used objective pronouns because me, her and them, all these are objects. Now let's talk about possessive pronouns. A possessive pronoun is a pronoun that shows ownership of someone or something. Like any other pronoun, it substitutes a noun phrase and can prevent its repetition. So possessive pronouns are used to replace the noun phrases. So it shows ownership, possession. If you possess or own something, you or any other person, then we use our possessive cases and we call them possessive pronouns. Now moving on, followed by some examples, let's look at them. Mine, yours, hers and theirs. All these are possessive cases. Possessive pronouns are used. This is showing possession to me as a first person. Yours, hers, theirs. They indicate ownership, referring back to the noun or the pronoun used before. We can use a possessive pronoun instead of a noun phrase. For example, these books are yours and mine. Now yours and mine are showing possession of the books here. They're talking about the subject. Similarly, we shall finally have what is rightfully ours. Now ours is referring back to we, since it is showing possession. House is theirs and its paint is flaking. Their mother gets along well with yours. So all these things are showing possession of the subject using these possessive pronouns, or we also call them pronouns in possessive case. Now, after learning about using pronouns in the subjective, objective and possessive cases, we will be looking at a very interesting simulation video that will be played for you by your teacher to learn more about pronouns in different cases. Here is a classroom activity for you with in your page book number 20, in your book page 20. Let's go through it. Now this is a classroom activity. On a cardboard, two columns will be labeled as subject and object. Number them from 1 to 6. Copy it on your own piece of paper. Write down any nouns you want in each column, total in 12. Write a sentence using the correct subject and object noun from each column. For example, Maria handed me my phone. replace the nouns with the correct pronouns. For example, she handed it to me. So you can see that the nouns are replaced with the pronouns. And moving on with our worksheet that is attached for your practice and your understanding. And now we have our homework. You have to make sentences in your notebook using subjective, objective, and possessive pronouns. Now, my dear learners, we are here at the end of our students' learning outcome, and we have covered all of the things that are mentioned. Now, we have some resources like skill sheet, question bank, worksheet, lesson plan, and also a presentation. All these are attached and can easily be found in the description of the video. Thank you for listening. I hope that you had great time learning about personal pronouns and using them in subjective, objective, and possessive cases. We also saw different examples and with different scenarios. You can rewatch the lecture, note it down, and then practice them as much as you can. Till the next video lesson, Allah Hafiz.